Guard confronts Camilla after Princess Charlotte reveals the evidence discovered in her car. Princess Charlotte had always been careful about the things she trusted, whether it was her personal belongings or the people closest to her. She had grown up in a world where secrets and whispers were a part of everyday life, but nothing could have prepared her for what she discovered on one quiet afternoon in her car. It was meant to be an ordinary day, just another trip through London in the back of her sleek, royal vehicle. But when Charlotte settled into the seat, she noticed something out of place, something tucked under the upholstery that shouldn't have been there. As she adjusted the seat, her fingers brushed against a small, folded piece of paper wedged deep between the cushion. Her curiosity piqued. Charlotte pulled it out slowly. The paper was old, with worn edges, and had an unfamiliar texture. She unfolded it carefully, as if afraid that something hidden inside could be too dangerous to touch. Her eyes scanned the words written in hurried, messy handwriting. It was a list of names, dates, and cryptic phrases that made little sense at first glance. Her heart began to race as she read the last line. Delivery to Camilla marked for royal eyes only. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Camilla, the queen consort. The name stood out in her mind like a jagged edge. Charlotte had never trusted Camilla completely, but this was something different. This was more than just a suspicion. It was evidence that linked her directly to something hidden and possibly dangerous. She stared at the paper for a long moment, unsure of how to proceed. What did this mean? Why was this piece of evidence in her car? The longer she thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Charlotte had heard rumors of power struggles and politics within the royal family, but to have something so direct, so specific right in her hands. It left her with more questions than answers. Was she being set up? Or was someone trying to send her a message? The princess turned the paper over, hoping for something that might explain more. There was nothing else, just the fading ink of the words written on the front. It was as if the paper had been intentionally hidden in a place she was bound to find, but by whom and why? She glanced around the car, her mind racing. Could someone have planted it there, hoping to frame her or someone close to her? The thought made her stomach churn. She knew she needed to act quickly, but what should she do next? Could she confront Camilla? That would be risky. Charlotte wasn't entirely sure what this evidence meant, but she couldn't ignore it. She had to get to the bottom of it, no matter the consequences. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte decided to keep the discovery to herself for the time being. If she went straight to anyone else in the family, the story might spread too quickly, and it could get out of hand. It was too important to be handled in haste. She needed time to think, to understand who was behind this and what it meant for the family. She had learned from her upbringing that everything in royal life was about appearances. No one could afford to make a mistake, especially not with something as serious as this. The princess had always been careful. She had spent years studying the royal family's history, the mistakes of the past, and the delicate balance of power that held everything together. One wrong move could cause a scandal, and in their world, scandals could topple more than just reputations. They could bring down entire legacies. With the paper still in her hand, Charlotte made her decision. She would keep it hidden for now, but it was clear she needed answers. Soon she would have to confront someone, but who? The more she thought about it, the more Camilla's name echoed in her mind. Why would her name be on this paper? What was going on behind closed doors? The tension was unbearable. Charlotte felt a deep responsibility to protect her family, but she also had a growing suspicion that someone close to her was involved in something darker than anyone realized. She couldn't let this mystery sit for too long. The thought of someone within her own family being involved in something like this sent a chill through her spine. What would it mean for the monarchy? For the royal family's future? The rest of the day felt like a blur as Charlotte tried to go about her duties. Her mind kept returning to the paper and its strange contents. It was as if she had been thrust into the middle of a puzzle she wasn't sure how to solve. No matter how much she tried to focus on other things, the evidence was always there, lingering in her thoughts. Later that night, after the royal events had finished, Charlotte found herself in her private study, pacing back and forth. The moonlight streamed in through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. She placed the paper on her desk and stared at it again. No matter how many times she read it, she couldn't make sense of it. There were too many questions and not enough answers. At that moment, she knew that whatever this was, it was bigger than a simple misunderstanding. She couldn't ignore it. This was a challenge, and Charlotte wasn't the type to back down. Her family might have their secrets, but she had a duty to uncover the truth. With the paper in her hands, she made a promise to herself. She would find out what this meant, no matter the cost. She was no longer just a princess living under the weight of royal expectations. She was someone determined to protect the monarchy, even if it meant uncovering things she wasn't ready to face. But the question lingered. What would Camilla do when she found out Charlotte had discovered the truth? It was a game of strategy now, and Charlotte wasn't sure if she was playing a losing hand or if she had just uncovered a crucial piece to the puzzle. But one thing was certain: the discovery of that paper had changed everything. She was no longer just a bystander in royal affairs. She was a player in a dangerous game where secrets could no longer stay hidden. The journey ahead would be fraught with tension, and every step Charlotte took would lead her closer to an inevitable confrontation. But the princess was ready, for the stakes were far higher than anyone could imagine. The next morning, Princess Charlotte found herself struggling to concentrate. The paper she had discovered in her car weighed heavily on her mind. Her duties as a member of the royal family called for her attention, but the mystery surrounding the evidence could not be ignored. She knew something had to be done. The royal family's reputation was everything, and if there was something hidden beneath the surface, it had to be brought to light. She made her way to the palace, but instead of heading straight to the royal chambers, Charlotte found herself wandering the halls, deep in thought. She knew she needed to speak to someone about the paper she had found, but who could she trust? The whispers within the palace were enough to make anyone wary. Who could she confide in without risking it all? The more she thought about it, the more the name Camilla kept echoing in her mind. The queen consort Camilla had always been a figure surrounded by intrigue and rumors. There was a sense of distance between her and Charlotte, a subtle tension that neither had ever acknowledged directly. Camilla's calm demeanor and carefully measured words hid a mind that was often hard to read. Charlotte wasn't sure whether she was being paranoid or if something truly untoward was at play, but it seemed impossible to ignore the possibility that Camilla was somehow involved. As Charlotte walked through the royal garden, the cool morning air offered little comfort. She knew she couldn't just barge into Camilla's presence demanding answers. That would only create more chaos and suspicion. No, this had to be done carefully. She would need a plan, and for that, she would have to rely on her instincts. Her mind was racing. What if Camilla was behind the whole thing? Or worse, what if someone close to Camilla had planted the evidence in her car, knowing that it would eventually lead her to confront the queen consort? The thought made Charlotte uneasy. Could she really trust anyone in the palace? As she approached the royal quarters, Charlotte decided she couldn't confront Camilla alone. Not yet, at least. She needed more information, more insight into the situation before making a move. She had heard whispers of alliances within the royal court, some of which seemed more like power struggles than genuine friendships. But who was behind these games, and why had they chosen her to uncover the secret? She couldn't ignore the fact that the evidence had been planted so deliberately. Whoever was responsible for hiding it in her car must have known it would be found. But why? What were they trying to achieve? Was this part of a larger plan? Charlotte spent the rest of the day considering her options. She couldn't talk to anyone in the palace yet, not until she had figured out what this all meant. There were too many unknowns, too many ways that a hasty decision could backfire. Her best bet, she decided, was to keep the discovery to herself for a little longer while she gathered more information. She needed to understand the full picture before confronting anyone. It was just before dinner when Charlotte's thoughts were interrupted. She had returned to her private quarters, hoping for some peace and quiet when her personal guard, a man named Thomas, knocked on the door. He had been one of her most trusted aides for years, someone who had served the royal family loyally without question. But tonight there was a different look in his eyes, a mixture of concern and urgency that made Charlotte's heart skip a beat. "Your Highness," Thomas began, his voice low but steady. "There's something you need to see. It's about the queen consort." Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. Her suspicions were rising again, but she couldn't let on that she had already been thinking about Camilla. She nodded calmly, gesturing for Thomas to continue. "Your Highness, I've been hearing rumors," Thomas said, stepping closer. "There are whispers about Camilla, about things that have been happening behind the scenes. Some of it involves her dealings with others in the royal court. I can't say much more yet, but you need to be careful. Things are not always as they seem." Charlotte's heart raced as she listened. She had known there was something strange going on, but hearing it confirmed by someone she trusted was unsettling. It was one thing to suspect that Camilla might be involved in something shady, but it was another to hear that it could be happening right under her nose. "Thank you, Thomas," Charlotte replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Please keep me informed of anything else you hear, but for now, let's not make this public. We don't know enough yet." Thomas nodded and left, leaving Charlotte alone with her thoughts. The weight of the situation had just become even heavier. She wasn't sure if she could trust Camilla or if the queen consort was as innocent as she had always appeared. But something was going on, and Charlotte needed to find out what it was. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Charlotte made her decision. She couldn't sit idly by any longer. She needed answers, and the only way to get them was to confront Camilla directly. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without risk. But Charlotte was determined. If the truth was out there, she was going to find it. Charlotte had always been cautious, weighing every decision carefully before taking action. But now, with everything on the line, she couldn't afford to be cautious any longer. She needed to know what was happening within the royal family, and she needed to know now. As she made her way to Camilla's private chambers, Charlotte's heart was pounding. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions, but she pushed them aside. This was it. The moment of truth had arrived. When she knocked on the door, the queen consort's voice echoed from within. "Enter." Charlotte stepped inside, her presence commanding yet controlled. Camilla was seated by the window, her back to the light. She turned slowly as Charlotte approached, her expression unreadable. "Your Highness," Charlotte began, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's something I need to discuss with you." Camilla raised an eyebrow, her gaze sharp. "Of course, my dear, what is it?" Charlotte hesitated for just a moment before continuing. She had to get to the point. "It's about the evidence, the document that was found in my car. I need to know what it means." The room fell silent as Camilla's expression shifted. For the first time, Charlotte saw something flicker in her eyes, something that wasn't quite fear, but perhaps caution. "What evidence?" Camilla asked, her voice low and almost dismissive. But Charlotte could see through it. There was more to this than she was letting on. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. She knew that the conversation was about to take a dangerous turn. But she wasn't turning back now. The conversation with Camilla left Princess Charlotte feeling both unsettled and determined. Camilla's calm, composed demeanor had been unnerving, especially considering the suspicions Charlotte had about her involvement in something larger than anyone had realized. Camilla had denied any knowledge of the document found in Charlotte's car, but Charlotte could see the unease in her eyes, even if she tried to mask it. Charlotte wasn't convinced, but she knew she couldn't make any rash decisions yet. She needed more information, more clarity on what was really going on behind the scenes. As Charlotte left Camilla's chambers, she felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had been so sure that confronting Camilla would bring answers, but it had only raised more questions. Camilla's response seemed rehearsed, almost too perfect. It was as if she were waiting for Charlotte to approach her, prepared to deny everything. Charlotte needed to dig deeper, and to do that, she had to be more strategic. She couldn't just rush in without a plan. In the days that followed, Charlotte kept her distance from Camilla and focused on gathering more information. The palace had always been a place of rumors and secrets, but the atmosphere now felt different, more tense, as if everyone was watching their backs. Charlotte began speaking with a few trusted aides, hoping they could shed some light on what was happening. There had always been whispers about hidden alliances within the royal court, but now they felt more significant. Could Camilla be involved in something larger than she could imagine, or was she just a pawn in a much bigger game? Charlotte was particularly interested in the names on the mysterious document. It seemed like more than just a list of random people. The more she thought about it, the more it began to look like a well-organized plan, perhaps even a conspiracy. But who was behind it? And why target her? Her role in the family had never been one of great influence, so why had someone chosen her to uncover this secret? There were too many pieces to the puzzle that didn't fit together yet. One evening, while going over her notes and trying to piece together everything she had learned so far, Charlotte received a visit from Thomas, her most trusted guard. He had been the one to warn her about the whispers in the palace, and she knew he would have valuable insights. His quiet demeanor and loyalty had made him a reliable ally in times of uncertainty. "Your Highness," Thomas said, stepping into the room with a serious expression on his face. "There's something else you need to know." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. She had learned to trust Thomas, and when he spoke with such urgency, she knew it was important. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. "There's been movement, not just within the court but outside of it as well, the document you found. It's tied to something bigger, much bigger than we initially thought. There are people, some outside the palace, who are involved." Charlotte's mind raced as she processed this new information. "Outside the palace," she echoed, feeling a wave of confusion and concern wash over her. "Who are these people, and what do they want with us?" Thomas glanced around the room, ensuring they were not overheard before continuing. "I don't know all the details yet, but there's talk of a power struggle, a hidden faction that's been gaining influence in the shadows. I've heard rumors of financial dealings, secret meetings, and alliances with people from other countries. Whoever is behind this has been operating in the dark for a long time." Charlotte felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that there were factions operating outside the royal family, working in secret, was unsettling. If someone outside the palace was involved, it meant that the stakes had just grown higher. This was no longer just a matter of royal intrigue or palace gossip. It was a dangerous game with real consequences. "Do you think Camilla is involved?" Charlotte asked, her voice low and cautious. Thomas hesitated, as if carefully weighing his words. "It's hard to say for sure. I've heard her name mentioned in connection with these secret dealings, but it's unclear what her role is. I don't think she's acting alone, but I can't say who she's working with. The situation is too complicated, and too many people have their hands in it." Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. The more she learned, the more tangled the web seemed to become. It was like trying to navigate a maze with every turn leading to more dead ends. But she couldn't give up now. She had come this far, and the truth was within reach. She just needed to keep pushing, keep asking the right questions. "Do you have any idea who these people are? Who could be behind it all?" she asked, trying to focus on the bigger picture. She knew she needed to understand the full scope of the situation before making any more moves. "I'm working on it," Thomas said, his voice grim, "but I've been told to be careful. There are eyes everywhere in this palace. You can't trust anyone, even those who seem loyal." Charlotte nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was saying. She knew better than anyone how dangerous the world of royal politics could be. People who were once allies could quickly become enemies, and everyone had their own agenda. She had to be careful with who she trusted from here on out. It was becoming clear that the conspiracy ran deeper than she had anticipated. And if it involved people outside the palace as well, the royal family's future could be at risk. "I'll keep you informed, Your Highness," Thomas said, bowing his head slightly before turning to leave. "But be cautious. The more you learn, the more dangerous this becomes." Charlotte sat alone in her chambers after Thomas left, her mind racing with the new information. It was clear now that the situation was far more complex than she had first realized. Camilla's involvement, if any, was just one part of a much larger puzzle. But who was behind it all? What were their goals, and what were they willing to do to achieve them? The more Charlotte thought about it, the more she realized that the answers she sought would not come easily. There were people in the palace who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. But Charlotte was determined. She would not rest until she had uncovered the truth. The future of the royal family, and perhaps the entire nation, depended on it. As the days went by, Charlotte became more focused, more determined. She had started this journey seeking answers, but now she was in the thick of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was mounting. But she wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that this was only the beginning. The secrets of the palace, the powerful figures pulling the strings behind the scenes, were all connected in ways she couldn't yet understand. But one thing was certain. The truth was out there, and Charlotte would stop at nothing to find it. The days following her conversation with Thomas felt like they were stretching on forever. Princess Charlotte couldn't escape the heavy feeling that weighed on her chest. The more she learned, the more she felt like she was uncovering a tangled web of deceit, a web that seemed impossible to unravel. But she couldn't stop now. She had to press forward, even if it meant risking everything. As the week passed, Charlotte grew more aware of the atmosphere around her in the palace. There was a quiet tension that seemed to settle in every corner, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The usual hum of the royal estate was quieter, as if the staff were also caught up in the whirlwind of uncertainty. It was clear that something was shifting beneath the surface, but no one seemed willing to talk openly about it. Charlotte, too, kept her thoughts to herself. She had learned to be discreet, especially when it came to matters as delicate as this one. She couldn't risk revealing too much, not yet. But the more time she spent thinking about it, the more she realized that her next move needed to be carefully calculated. She couldn't rush into anything without fully understanding who was behind all of this. Was it Camilla? Was there a deeper conspiracy within the royal court that stretched far beyond just her? The answers were still elusive, but Charlotte couldn't afford to wait any longer. The first thing Charlotte did was return to the evidence she had discovered in her car. She had kept it hidden, locked away in a safe in her private chambers, unsure of what to do with it. As she carefully unfolded the paper once more, she realized how little she truly understood about its significance. The names on the list, the dates, and the cryptic words, it was as if someone had deliberately left her a trail of breadcrumbs, but they were too scattered to make sense of. Charlotte began making connections between the names on the document and those within the royal family's inner circle. She had heard rumors about certain individuals, people whose loyalty was often questioned. She suspected that some of them might be involved in the shadows, but she couldn't draw any conclusions without more solid proof. The paper, for all its mystery, was still not enough to expose the full truth. It was then that Charlotte realized she needed to get closer to Camilla. She couldn't keep waiting on the sidelines. The queen consort might be the key to everything, but she would never open up to Charlotte unless she had something to offer in return. Charlotte had to make her move, but this time it would be different. This time she wouldn't just ask questions. She would be prepared to face whatever came next, even if it meant putting herself at risk. One evening after dinner, Charlotte found herself standing outside Camilla's chambers. Her mind was racing, her thoughts jumbled as she wondered how she would approach the queen consort. Was it time to confront her again? Or would it be better to wait, to observe her actions from a distance? Before Charlotte could make up her mind, the door to Camilla's chambers opened, and the queen consort stepped out. She seemed to hesitate for a moment when she saw Charlotte standing there, as if she hadn't expected to be caught off guard. But then her face softened, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Princess Charlotte," Camilla greeted her with a slight bow. "What brings you here at this hour?" Charlotte felt a wave of determination wash over her. This was her chance, she couldn't waste it. "I need to speak with you," Charlotte said, her voice calm but firm. "It's important." Camilla raised an eyebrow, but she didn't appear surprised. "Of course, come in," she replied, stepping aside to allow Charlotte to enter. The tension between them was palpable as Charlotte stepped into the room. It was a lavish space, filled with soft lighting and expensive furniture, but the lavish surroundings didn't soften the atmosphere. It was clear that both women understood the gravity of the situation. As they sat down, Charlotte didn't waste any time. "I need to know the truth, Camilla, about the document that was found in my car," she said, her gaze locked with the queen consort S. For a moment, Camilla said nothing. She just stared at Charlotte as though weighing her options. Then she sighed and sat back in her chair. "I was hoping you would bring this up," Camilla said softly, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "But the truth is not something that is easy to face, and some truths are best left hidden, especially when they involve the future of the monarchy." Charlotte's heart pounded in her chest. Was Camilla about to admit something? Could this be the moment when everything finally made sense? "What do you mean?" Charlotte asked, her voice steady, despite the storm of questions swirling in her mind. Camilla hesitated again, glancing down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her tone was quieter. "I can't tell you everything, Charlotte, but I will tell you this. There are people who want to see the royal family fall. They are working from the inside and from the outside. And they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. I have been trying to protect the family, protect you, but the forces against us are stronger than you realize." Charlotte was stunned by Camilla's words. She had always suspected something was wrong, but hearing it out loud was a different thing entirely. This wasn't just about one document or one secret. It was about something much bigger, something that could change everything. "You're not saying you're involved in this?" "Conspiracy, are you?" Charlotte asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Camilla's eyes flicked up to meet Charlotte S., and for the first time the queen consort looked vulnerable. "No," she said firmly. I am not involved. But there are forces in the court, in the very palace where we stand, who are. Charlotte leaned forward, trying to absorb the weight of Camilla's words. This was it. This was the key to everything, the truth she had been searching for. But where did this lead them? Who could they trust now? For the rest of the evening, the two women talked in hushed voices, sharing what little they knew about the conspiracy within the royal court. Charlotte's mind was spinning with the new information. The queen consort had confirmed her worst fears. There was a hidden enemy, someone powerful enough to threaten the entire royal family. As Charlotte left Camilla's chambers that night, her heart was heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. The battle for the future of the monarchy had only just begun, and it would be a fight like no other. But Charlotte wasn't afraid. She would do whatever it took to protect her family, and she would not back down until the truth was exposed, no matter where it led. The days after Charlotte's conversation with Camilla were filled with more questions than answers. The queen consort's words had shaken her to the core. There were forces inside the palace, people who had been working behind the scenes for far too long, plotting something that could destroy the royal family. But Camilla hadn't said enough. She had given Charlotte a glimpse into a much bigger conspiracy, but there was still so much left unsaid. Charlotte felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. She couldn't sit idly by anymore. This wasn't just about secrets and hidden documents. This was about the future of the monarchy, the safety of her family, and the stability of the nation. She had to act, and she had to act fast. But the more Charlotte thought about it, the more she realized just how dangerous the situation had become. She couldn't trust anyone completely, not even her closest allies. The conspiracy was deeper than she could have imagined, and the people involved were willing to do anything to achieve their goals. Charlotte knew she had to be careful. One wrong move, and it could all fall apart. She spent hours in her chambers, going over every detail she had learned so far. The names on the mysterious document, the whispers about Camilla, the rumors of powerful factions in the royal court, everything seemed connected, but she couldn't see how. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half of the pieces missing. Still, Charlotte couldn't give up. She had to keep pushing forward. The next step, she decided, was to talk to someone outside the royal court. Someone who wasn't directly involved, but might have knowledge of the things that were happening behind closed doors. She needed someone who could give her perspective, someone who could help her piece together the information she had. And that person, she realized, was Thomas. Charlotte summoned him to her chambers late one evening, the palace silent and still around them. When Thomas entered, she saw the same cautious look in his eyes that had been there the day he first warned her about the whispers in the palace. He had always been loyal, but even his loyalty now seemed overshadowed by the weight of everything that was unfolding. "Thomas," Charlotte began, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "I need your help. Things are moving faster than I can keep up with, and I need someone I can trust to help me understand what's really going on." Thomas nodded, his expression serious. "I'm here to help, Your Highness. What do you need?" Charlotte took a deep breath before speaking. "I need to know who I can trust. Who's behind all of this? Who's pulling the strings in the shadows?" Thomas hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There are names, Your Highness, people whose influence goes beyond the palace. There are those in the royal family who have their own agendas, and there are others, powerful figures from outside the kingdom, who want to see the monarchy fall. It's a game of power, and we're all just pieces on the board." Charlotte's heart sank as she absorbed Thomas's words. The situation was more complicated than she had feared. There were people in her own family who could be involved in the conspiracy. She couldn't believe it, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. "Do you know who these people are?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas shook his head. "Not all of them, Your Highness, but I've heard enough to know that some of the royal court members are playing both sides. They're feeding information to those outside the palace, and in return they're gaining power. They think they're untouchable, but they're not. They won't stop until they have what they want." Charlotte's thoughts swirled as she tried to process what Thomas had said. Power struggles, hidden alliances, and betrayal. It was all too much to take in. She had always known that politics in the royal court was complex, but she had never imagined it could be this dark. "I need to find out who's behind this," Charlotte said, her voice steady with resolve. "I need to know everything, and I need to act before it's too late." Thomas nodded again, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll help you, Your Highness. We'll get to the bottom of this together." The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and strategy. Charlotte couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Every step had to be carefully calculated. She knew that the people who were behind the conspiracy were powerful, and if they suspected that Charlotte was onto them, they would stop at nothing to silence her. As the days passed, Charlotte grew more focused. She couldn't trust the royal court entirely, but she couldn't shut herself off from the people she still had faith in. She began meeting with a select few, those who had proven themselves loyal over the years. With Thomas by her side, she made sure that the information she gathered was kept as secret as possible. In one of these meetings, Charlotte learned something that made her blood run cold. There were whispers that a key figure in the conspiracy was none other than a close advisor to the king, someone Charlotte had always trusted. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. Could it really be true? Could someone so close to her family be involved in such treachery? The more Charlotte thought about it, the more she realized that no one was safe. The conspiracy was larger than she had ever imagined, and it was going to take everything she had to bring it down. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people who shared her goal of protecting the royal family and restoring order to the kingdom. In the midst of the growing uncertainty, Charlotte made a decision. She would confront the advisor. It wasn't something she took lightly, but it was the only way forward. She needed answers, and the advisor was the key to unlocking the truth. That night, Charlotte sat alone in her chambers, her mind racing with what was to come. She knew that confronting the advisor would be risky. The person she had once trusted could turn out to be the one who betrayed her family. But Charlotte was no longer the young, naive princess who had once trusted blindly. She had learned the hard way that trust had to be earned, and she would not let the people who threatened her family go unchallenged. With resolve in her heart, Charlotte stood up and walked toward the door. She was ready to face whatever came next. The future of the royal family of her family depended on it. She couldn't afford to back down now. As Charlotte made her way to the advisor's quarters, she felt the weight of what was about to happen. The confrontation was inevitable, but it was still terrifying. She didn't know what she would uncover or how the advisor would react. But one thing was certain, she couldn't stop now. She had come too far to turn back. The door before her loomed, and as she raised her hand to knock, she felt a sense of determination flood her. No matter what secrets were hiding in the shadows, she was ready to expose them. The truth was waiting, and she would find it, no matter where it led. Charlotte's hand hovered over the door, her heart beating loudly in her chest. She had come so far, and now, as she stood on the threshold of what could be the most important conversation of her life, the weight of her decision settled heavily on her shoulders. She had trusted this advisor for years. This person had always been a guide, a mentor of sorts, but now everything had changed. Could it really be true? Could this trusted ally be one of the people working to tear her family apart? She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The time for hesitation had passed. The secrecy, the whispers, the fear, it all led to this moment. The advisor had to be confronted. There was no other choice. She knocked on the door, and a moment later, the voice from within called out, "Enter." Charlotte pushed open the door and stepped inside. The advisor, sitting behind a large desk, looked up at her with a calm, neutral expression, as if nothing in the world could unsettle them. It was the same look they always wore, unfazed, in control, collected. But Charlotte had learned something crucial in these past few days. Appearances could be deceiving. The advisor smiled, clearly not expecting such a late visit. "Princess Charlotte, what brings you here?" Charlotte didn't return the smile. Instead, she walked forward with purpose, her steps measured and deliberate. She had no time for pleasantries. The truth was at stake, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It's about the conspiracy. About what's happening in the royal court." The advisor's smile faltered for a split second, but they quickly recovered, their eyes narrowing slightly. Charlotte could see the subtle shift, the guard, the calculation, but it was too late to turn back now. "What conspiracy?" the advisor asked, leaning back in their chair. The tone was casual, as if Charlotte were talking about a simple matter of royal business. Charlotte didn't flinch. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I know about the forces working against my family. The hidden factions, the alliances formed in secret, the people who want to destroy everything we've built." The advisor said nothing at first. They studied Charlotte intently, as if weighing their next words. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope, each moment more tense than the last. Finally, the advisor spoke, their voice soft but carrying a weight that Charlotte couldn't ignore. "You think you know everything," they said. "But there is much more going on than you realize." Charlotte's stomach churned. This wasn't just a matter of a few hidden schemes, it was much deeper, much more dangerous. But she couldn't show any fear, she couldn't back down now. "I know enough to understand that the royal family is in danger," Charlotte replied, her voice steady, "and I know that you're involved." For the first time, the advisor's expression shifted, a flicker of something passing through their eyes. It was subtle, but Charlotte saw it. She wasn't mistaken. They were hiding something, and she was getting closer to the truth. The advisor sighed, almost as if they had been expecting this moment for some time. "I never wanted it to come to this, Charlotte," they said quietly. "But there are things in play that even you cannot control. The monarchy's time is running out. The forces we've gathered have their own vision for the future, and it doesn't involve preserving the old ways." Charlotte's heart raced. The words stung, but she couldn't let them show. This was the moment when everything could change. She was getting closer to the core of the conspiracy, closer to the people who would stop at nothing to bring down her family. But the advisor wasn't finished. "You see, Charlotte," they continued, their voice colder now, "this isn't just about power, it's about survival. The monarchy's time has come and gone. There are new powers emerging, and they are stronger, more capable. You and your family, no matter how noble your intentions, are standing in the way of progress." Charlotte's mind reeled with the implications of the advisor's words. This wasn't just a fight for the throne, it was a fight for the very future of the kingdom. And her family, her bloodline, was seen as the obstacle to that future. "So you're willing to destroy everything for the sake of progress?" Charlotte asked, her voice shaking with the weight of the question. The advisor didn't answer immediately. They looked at her almost pityingly, as though she were a child who couldn't understand the complexity of the world they were speaking of. Finally, they spoke, their words measured and final. "I'm doing what needs to be done, Charlotte. I'm doing what's necessary." For the future, Charlotte's anger flared. She could feel the fire of defiance rising in her chest, threatening to spill over. She wasn't going to let this person destroy everything her family had fought for. She wasn't going to let them rewrite history. "No," Charlotte said firmly, "what you're doing is tearing us apart. It's a betrayal, and I won't stand for it." The advisor stood up now, their eyes hardening. "You don't understand," they said, their voice lowering. "You may think you're in control, but you're not. The forces against you are already in motion. The game has been set, and you're playing a losing hand." Charlotte felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't back away. "I'm not playing," she said, her voice full of resolve. "I'm fighting. And I will do whatever it takes to protect my family and the future of this kingdom." The advisor gave her a long look, as if trying to assess whether Charlotte truly understood the stakes. Finally, they spoke again, their voice barely a whisper. "You have no idea what you're up against," they said softly, "but you'll learn soon enough." With that, the advisor turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. Charlotte stood there for a moment, her mind racing. She had learned so much, but she knew this was only the beginning. The battle was far from over. She had uncovered one piece of the puzzle, but there were many more to find. As Charlotte left the advisor's chambers, she felt a renewed sense of determination. The truth was darker than she had imagined, but she couldn't back down. She wouldn't. Her family's legacy was at stake, and she would do whatever it took to protect it. The future of the kingdom depended on it. The path ahead was unclear, but Charlotte knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. The fight for her family, for the monarchy, was only just beginning.